Maybe Shakespeare put it best. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers and sisters. For he who has shed his blood with me this day shall be my brother. Be he ne'er so vile, this day shall gentle his condition.
Powerful.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
According to the National Institutes of Health, an increasing number of veterans have been receiving health care services through the Department of Veterans Affairs since Operation Enduring Freedom in 2001, Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2003, and Operation New Dawn in 2010. Beyond concerns associated with modern-era military conflicts, veterans today are also dealing with more nuanced mental health issues unrelated to conflict than ever before. In today's episode of OK State of Mind, we'll be speaking with 3 individuals who have close ties to the military and who are acutely aware of the unique challenges that veterans today face. All 3 work directly or indirectly with veterans in the context of mental health, and they're here today to help us better understand the plight of those who are or who once did serve our country in the United States military. And so with that, Neil, Maggie, Lori, can you guys start out by giving us some context, letting us know a little bit about what you do here at Family and Children's Services, and also what your association with veterans is right now? Maggie, we'll start with you.
My name's Maggie Penny. At Family and Children's, I work for COPES. I'm a crisis therapist. I was a military spouse, married to a Marine. As far as my work with veterans, I am an outreach worker with the VA homeless program here.
And Neil, how about you?
I'm an IRT therapist with the Navigate program. We deal with individuals who are suffering from first onset psychosis. Very fascinating work. As far as my military background, I am a retired Army officer. I served for a total of 27 years, going between active duty, National Guard, and Reserve. 1 tour to Bosnia, 2 combat tours to Iraq.
And Lori, our co-host, tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, that's impressive. My name is Lori. I am the new Vice President of Community Engagement here at Family and Children's Services. I've been on board about 4 months. I'm a retired United States Naval officer, all on active duty. From New Orleans. Actually, when it comes down to my affiliation with veterans, I was a military wife of another naval officer who was in Iraq, Fallujah. Also, I had 2 children born in the military. Also, my mother was the caregiver of her younger brother, who was a Marine veteran, who actually was in Vietnam. So,
all right.
Yep.
Well, today I have some specific things that I want to talk about with regard to veterans and mental health. But before we get into the specifics, I'm curious if any of you has any general feeling about your experience in or with the military pertaining to mental health. Can you just speak generally to what you saw, what you experienced? How do you perceive the mental health situation with regard to folks in the military?
So as a spouse, I had the opportunity to be pretty involved with my community. My husband was an officer, and his unit deployed pretty frequently. And on those deployments, we would stay pretty connected to other spouses, and so that we could kind of provide that community and support to one another. But I did notice a big change when my spouse left the military. I think the real transition for him from military service into civilian life, and for all veterans that we knew, that's when I saw the biggest changes and the biggest, I guess, difficulties and disparities where mental health kind of came into play.
Yeah, I think when you're on active duty, you're more voluntold. So if you see something, like see something, say something, you have your brother to your left or right, or sister to your left or right. So they may notice something different, and your commanding officer, whoever that leader may be, they kind of push you along. And next thing you know, you may have an appointment, to see, someone in behavioral health, what we call it, same as mental health. So the access was really good at that time.
Oh, yeah. That's good. We just did an episode recently about stigma surrounding seeking therapy. And it kind of makes me curious in this context. Did you sense that there was any sort of stigma, maybe when you were active military, in seeking out mental health services? Was it welcomed? Was it hush hush? How was that perceived?
Well, I'd like to address that if I could.
Yeah.
My second tour to Iraq was 2006, 2007, and I was out in Western Iraq, not too far from Fallujah, a little place called Ramadi.
Oh yeah, Ramadi.
Ramadi, yes. And I was a commander. I was a company commander in charge of a civil affairs unit there. The mindset that the active duty people had toward mental health was basically, at the start, it was, suck it up and deal with it. It didn't happen and it didn't occur. There were combat stress team people there that you could go to, but no self-respecting officer was going to go there. However, I sent people there who had, some mental health issues of their own. And I remember, like wanting to go myself, but I felt that stigma until one day we were, every morning there would be this big, giant teleconference where the commanders would get on and they would talk about the nationwide situation in Iraq. And, you had to be at least like a 2-star to get on this thing. I remember listening to that thing one time, and General Petraeus came up on the line. And General Petraeus came up and basically said, combat stress is here. It's okay to go there. If you need to go there, I encourage you to do so. And I think that led to some, maybe the dam breaking, the stigma going away where people could go and not feel as though they were being get the side eye from their superiors or something. But that was my experience with the second tour of Iraq. First tour, I did the invasion, 03, 04. I like to say I invaded Iraq with 150,000 of my best friends.
Wow.
The only mental health concerns we had was that we weren't able to sleep because we were so scared.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Maggie, do you see much of a stigma in dealing with folks who are now out of the military, veterans? Do you feel that the stigma remains, or do you feel that veterans have embraced it?
I think it can go both ways. The population that I work with, I think there's a lot of awareness for the needs that they have in terms of mental health as far as the other, health disparities that exist in the homeless population. But I think that the stigma still very much exists among veterans, that it's sort of just, they can get through it, this will pass. And you see headway being made, but I think the stigma still definitely exists.
Do you think that it has anything to do with a sense of toughness that needs to be felt when you're out actually in combat? Does that come into play at all?
I think it does. Yes, I think certainly people think that it's just a matter of being tough and kind of getting through it. And I think that's probably one of the things that keeps veterans from utilizing the resources at the VA and outside of the VA. But, the population that I work with is pretty actively using services with the VA. So I do see a change is occurring.
In reference to the veterans basically not utilizing the VA or just passing by it because they feel that the people at the VA, some folks that, especially the ones I'm coming in contact, they feel those people are really sick. Those are really injured people. I'm not that injured, so I don't need to go there. So they're not utilizing the resources, which is very, interesting when, conversation with my own, fellow military members. What I normally see is that a decline in, maybe they lose their job or they having relationship issues. They're getting more 0 to 100 quickly, very irritable. And now you're having problems with your marriage, but really you need to see someone. These are when I think of it as when the invisible wounds become visible. And that's compartmentalized, those compartments, because in the military, we are accustomed to basically compartmentalizing everything. You got to keep going. Like you mentioned earlier, you're out there with all your buds, but really you can't sleep at night, but you need to compartmentalize and keep going. But what happens when those compartments start to unlock and come open?
Yeah.
And so you start seeing that. So I know with friends and then with folks that I talk with that were in the military, because I always try to connect with other veterans just to see, what is it like being out? What type of suggestions would you have, or what type of issues are you're experiencing?
Mm-hmm. How does that compartmentalization impact one's identity, especially as he or she transitions out of the military? Does it create identity crisis? How do folks manage that?
You manage it because if you're in a position of leadership, your focus is accomplishing the mission. You're giving the tools, you're giving the personnel, you're pointed toward the objective, and you move out and take that objective. And you do that day after day. Your personal life, it's in a compartment in the back of your mind. You don't think about it. So you compartmentalized and you just ignored whatever your fears were. You just did the mission. But the thing that really got me about compartmentalization is that when you're a reservist and you rotate out, okay, one day, literally, you are in combat.
Yes.
18 hours later, you're back in the United States.
Right.
One long plane flight, and you're back in the United States. 7 to 10 days later, you're back home. So when you are out processing and you're going through the physicals and they're asking you if you have any problems, you don't have any problems.
Better not say you have
That's
any
right.
problems.
Because you'll be stuck. You want to get out of there and go home. So that's something else you compartmentalize.
That's interesting.
My back hurts, but I'm not going to tell them. I'm seeing things, but I'm not going to tell them because I want to get out here and go home. Unfortunately, that may be some of what we see here at the veteran population. A lot of people just, kind of ignore that thing, put it in the back of their mind. Then they come back here and suddenly it jumps out of the box and says, let's deal with it.
You talk about people coming home with this, up there in a compartment, and they're out of active military duty. They're not interacting with, doctors or psychiatrists or psychologists there on site. What resources do they have when they come home for some therapy, some help?
Well, there is, and thank goodness there's always the Veterans Administration, and we poo-poo the VA and we say, it's the VA. And I share your concerns, like, you don't want to go in there because you think those are really injured people. When you drive up to the VA and you see these long lines of disabled parking spaces, you're seeing people that have really suffered. You go in there and you see people in wheelchairs and people on walkers, people with, Vietnam veteran baseball caps. You look at those guys and you think those guys they paid the price.
Missing limbs.
They're missing limbs, yeah. They paid for it in blood. I'm just in here because, I have PTSD. I'm a wimp. And so you beat yourself up that way. But it's not, as I've gotten older, and I talk to people, I said, no, those, like you said, those emotional wounds have to be dealt with. We can bury them all we want to, but they're going to come back and bite us at some point if we choose to continue to ignore them. So that's been, in my experience, the VA has been very beneficial and very helpful for me.
Yeah.
I remember a situation. So I'm at work, I'm in San Diego, and I slip and fall. And I really knocked myself out because my brother to my left and a brother to my right, when I came to, they were holding me, getting me up. I was fine. I'm good. I'm more embarrassed than anything. So I go home. The next day, it's time, we all try to eat together and go to lunch. So for me, it was my turn to drive for lunch. So everybody would call, file into my car and I would drive. I said, I don't have my car. And they say, well, how did you get here? And I was like, I was dropped off. And so when we all walk out, they see my car. And it was like, hey, LT. And he looked at me like, I thought you didn't drive. I'm like, I didn't. It was like, well, what in the world is your car doing? I'm like, I don't know how it got there. Like, I don't even know. And it was like, whoa, like, what's wrong with you? And I was like, nothing. And I was like, I don't know, my head. I hit my head so hard and I had a knot and stuff. And it was like, we're going to bring you in. We're going to go right to Balboa. We bring you to the hospital over here. I was like, oh, come on. This is embarrassing. But I guess I must have had a little amnesia, a little concussion or whatever it was. But needless to say, I ended up in a TBI program. That was the most embarrassing thing ever. And here's the reason. Like you're saying, you're talking about being out to war. You're in war. So I'm sitting around in this whole waiting room constantly with people who've been to war, who've been through, blasts. And that's why they're in there with TBI. And they took that very seriously. And I was embarrassed, and I decided I'm not going. I'm just not going to go. But they called my command to say I'm not showing up, because it's not good when your people don't show up to appointments. Remember that? So it's like, I'm not showing up, but they had a conversation with me to say that there's nothing more important than my mental health, my health, and I need to go to my appointments. And they're going to give me all the time I need. So there was very, understanding. But I was still embarrassed. I was like, why do I need to be here? These guys have been to war, and I'm sitting here, and I'm like, just was clumsy or something, and I fell and hit my head, knocked myself out. But they're talking about war stories, and I would remember just keep putting my head down. I didn't want, but it was great because it allowed the folks to talk about their stories. It's kind of a way you just didn't realize it. You're already in a group setting, and it worked out. But the behavioral health portion was embedded in it. So whether I wanted to, deal with mental health or not, I was going to deal with it. So basically, I understand the veterans that's now when they pass the VA and they don't want to go there, because those people are injured. They've been to war. They got missing limbs. They're really sick. And, I just got battle wounds, internal battle wounds. So,
Sounds like some of the most cathartic experiences you had was out there in the waiting room.
Is out, exactly. And it, but it worked.
Yeah.
It worked. And so that shameness and that denial would, once I became educated and informed, me hitting my head is just no different. It's not that it was a difference, but the damage of a blast is just as hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, both you and Neil have kind of touched on this, and I'm going to take it a step farther. You guys are talking about, hey, people are out there getting hurt. They're in this hospital hurt right now. What about, survivor's guilt? I mean, some were hurt, some did not make it back. I can imagine that feeling that guilt about, I just bumped my head.
Yeah, you can't escape that. If each tour I was on, I knew people who died. When I was in the invasion of Iraq, we were in southern Iraq. I was at Talil Air Base outside of Nasiriyah. I was there in October of 2004 when a terrorist bombing attacked the Italian military compound, killed 17 people, some of whom I knew. I remember in 2006 when we were in Ramadi, and I was having lunch breakfast. I was having breakfast with this young, energetic captain. He's like, he could speak Arabic, and he was like almost special forces. And he's like, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to get the tribes, and they're going to come along with us. And he was like a fellow nerd. He was like, yeah, it's going to be like the Ride of the Rohirrim from Lord of the Rings. I said, really? They're going to ride in like that? So, yeah, you're going to love it, Major J. I said, all right, tell you what, when you get back there, Captain, we'll sit down and have lunch. He was dead 2 hours later from an IED.
Wow.
And that's the kind of thing that you have to deal with. Survivor's guilt is very serious, and it's vicious in that even when you're home on leave, you want to go back.
Absolutely.
They send you home for 2 weeks, and you come home, and you're the first couple of days you're drinking beer and you're eating burgers and all the things that you hadn't had because you've been living, out in the combat zone. And after about day 7 or day 8, you start getting antsy. You start looking at the news, trying to see, what are my boys doing? How are my boys? Have there been any attacks in Ramadi? And by day 10, day 12, you're jumping at the bit to get back. And it's weird, but that's the bond that you feel for that person next to you, like you were alluding to, Lori. We're there to just look out for the person next to us because we know that they've got our back and we've got theirs.
Absolutely.
And survivor's guilt is real and it's insidious.
Yeah. What can we do to help these people?
Like you were talking with the VA, the guys just sitting there, just processing.
Just sitting there.
Just sit there and just process it. Just talk with a fellow veteran or a mental health professional that can understand, because you got to just deal with that.
Yeah. And sometimes those stories are very just gruesome. I have a good friend. his whole groups was, killed. He survived. He still was wounded. And it was not only was he just wounded, he was wounded mentally and physically. That's so I understand exactly what you're saying. But just a conversation to keep talking. I recall I was like in Rhode Island, I'm in DC coming back, and I'm watching the news, and there he was on the news. It said this incident that happened, and it was him. And I dialed the number, and he picked up. It's strange, but he was okay. The thing about it, and he's thriving, doing well, everything. But it's the whole idea is that talking with someone. So that's what he really needed. He just needed a friend. Like sometimes you can't dial the hospital at 1:30 in the morning because you can't sleep, or you're having flashback, or you want to go back, or you're just reminiscing. So that for me, it's important, like, to be that friend for another, comrade, colleague, that I can just I pick up. You just never know.
Yeah. Lori, can you talk a little bit about women in the military, challenges that are unique to women in the military?
Yeah, actually, before I came on, I was just talking to one of my very good friends, her husband, a special ops, he passed away, and she was left with a young daughter. She was also, when the Pentagon was hit, she was in an annex. So she tells the story about hearing the engines flying right over them, and then they're looking out, and then all of this. And, it's like traumatic, like, oh my goodness. But you can see these stories on television. But just to actually talk with somebody and be close to somebody to have that. And, so she retires like myself, and, she started having different things, it's not like it's PTSD or anything. We're not labeling anything. So we don't like that labeling stuff. So it's just like, I don't feel that great. Maybe it's just here or whatever the case may be. But as she continued to go to like the VA, and the VA's done a great job, like for women, we have our own area, own wing now, and that's really good. So it's kind of nice to, woman to woman. And when her PTSD, really, when you would think it's to me, I'm thinking it's from that blast. I'm thinking it's from the Pentagon, running from that, being a part of that. But it wasn't that. When they really got down to they went deep into that compartment, it was her military sexual trauma. So that was like blown away. And just to know now that, there's the vet centers, there's over like 300 vet centers all around. But she said that's what helped her, being in small little circles with other women who've actually experienced, military sexual trauma. And for myself, I can't say I experienced military sexual trauma, but I was able to put a close on it before it happened. And it was just that I was able to speak out. She was never able to speak out. A lot of women, they don't speak out, or they're afraid to speak out. No one believes them. But I spoke up and spoke out, and the problem was taken care of. So that's that was powerful. So it allowed me, as I continued on my military careers, to help other women until this day. That's one of the things that I'm real big on. Is helping and speaking out and believing when someone says, Do
you have a sense for how widespread that situation is, military sexual trauma? I mean, I'm not asking for numbers here, but did you interact with many people who had experienced that?
Absolutely, but it's something you don't really talk about, but if you put a bunch of females in a room together, which I've been there, and I am shocked at the conversations. And it's not just women, it's men too, being in the medical and working in medical, I would see the men come in the same exact thing. So it's not just women, but right now we're talking about military sexual trauma. That's why it's not women's sexual trauma, it's military. But in the female aspect of it is that if it wasn't a problem, we wouldn't have the resources the way we have. That's how I look at it. So regardless of the numbers, but it's showcasing to women, it's okay to come out now.
So we kind of come back full circle to compartmentalization again, and it just compounds it because you have this military sexual trauma, then the compartmentalization, which is like a repression of, what you're experiencing. We've talked about PTSD. We've talked about traumatic brain injuries, survivor's guilt. Maggie, do you experience folks who are experiencing any of these, and how is that conversation going?
I would say absolutely. So within the VA, is the VA homeless program, it's housing first. So we're visiting with them because they want to work on housing goals, or sometimes we're just doing outreach, trying to see if we can help them engage and initiate service within the VA. But a lot of things will come up, and helping them embrace and accept. I very often take veterans to appointments. I'll wait with them. I'll make sure they get back to where they stay. So I do, as a social worker, feel like, this is an opportunity that I have to not just normalize an experience, but help them embrace whatever they're going through so that I can make sure that they do find wellness. So.
Thanks, Maggie. That was really good, So, and thanks for the work that you do to help us veterans, because we all together is one. I recall, down at one duty station, they're having an event that's getting ready to go down. So we have more officers than normal, and we try to eat together. Where we were doing lunch, so we all try to, when the pilot's coming in, the doctor's getting off, the chaplains, everybody try to get together and break bread together. Well, we're breaking bread, and we have one of the workers. He is there. He's just all of a sudden he just didn't want to talk right now. He's just not interested. He's not engaged. Just out the blue. But he was earlier walking over to the galley, and everyone's there, and he just put his hand on his head, and then he just took off running fast as he could. In his uniform. We're all on a military base, and he was thinking like, what is up with him? That's what the other fellows were saying. And it was like, okay, Lori, go ahead, because they know that's what she's going to go, figure out what's going on. So I went back, I went to his office and knocked on the door, and he sat down. He said, look, Commander, I just want to apologize. He said, there's one thing that you don't know, this I don't ever talk about. I don't know what happened, but he was over in Iraq, and he's like, you see that, you have the window, like you see this trash can over here? Well, they just blew up a building that close to me. I don't know. It's just something happened. I hear these sounds, and it's just like I hold my head. And he just start running. He said, I'm so embarrassed. Could you just tell the rest of them? I said, okay. But he never shared that story with me, But because way before I knew about those blasts, those TBIs, and he was one of them to get some help. And then, so because he never got any help, now, he needs mental help, because he didn't get that help early, those blasts, the TBI is real.
Yes. One of my officers that was serving under me received a TBI. He was in a Humvee. They were on a patrol, I believe, in Ramadi. And they were going down the street, and it's rubble on either side. It looked like the moon. I mean, it was just level. And somebody jumped out from behind one of these piles of rubble, couldn't have been more than 20, 30, 40 feet from him, with an RPG on his shoulder, and he fired it, and it detonated against the armored Humvee on the passenger side front. So he got hit by TBI. So I've heard from him. He still has migraines, and we gave him a Bronze Star and a Combat Action Badge.
Well, he earned that.
Yeah, he earned it, and a Purple Heart.
And a Purple Heart.
And a Purple Heart. But yeah, it's real. And, the TBI. That's the one instance that I am aware of. But I've seen other instances where people have just had some issues in combat and just like, I want to go home. I've seen that once or twice.
Yeah, that's when those compartments just start unlocking themselves, and you have no idea what's really going on. I know I have a few friends, when fireworks come. I had one, just hit the deck when the fireworks came, and everybody's looking like, what is going on? And, they peek up to say like, oh, because you also are kind of embarrassed and shame because no one else see what's going on. And until they tell their stories, we don't know. Those are the invisible wounds that you do not see. And they turn out to be visible. And then to tell the stories, just those blasts just going off, those fireworks incoming. I had another anesthesia person. He left, he called once, I didn't answer. He called again, I did answer because it was late. And of course he was in Iraq and he was like, look, I need you to just get to he's from Florida. Can you just tell my mother and my dad I love them? He's giving me all these messages because he didn't want to ward them that late. But he was like, we're taking on incoming. And he was the only anesthesia at the time because they were already out. So to hear these stories after stories, I know for me, guess what? That's kind of burdensome on me as well, because I even have my own, scenario. So it's so good to be in a group, but we vow to help one another. So when the burden gets too tough, let me just give a call. But so those stories are real. So you have all types of veterans. We have unique PTSD trauma.
Well, and it's interesting what you were saying about PTSD a little bit earlier, and I say this as one who has not been in the military. Lori, as you know, my dad was a Marine, but he was out by the time I was born. So as one who has not been in the military, as I consider the concept of PTSD, it's easy for me to say, I understand that there's terror involved with that there's fear, that there's trauma involved with that. But you mentioned something that I think is really interesting, and that's you mentioned shame and embarrassment.
Yes.
And as one not having been in the military, I don't think of that. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because again, it's just one more thing or two more things that are adding to the mental stress that veterans are facing.
Thank you. And you're a military brat. We're in double dog, right? So Maggie, when you think of being a military spouse, did you feel, because I was a military spouse as well, did you feel kind of shame and guilt behind like your husband serving in war and then coming home?
I don't know that I felt shame or guilt. I was actually going to speak to what you just said a few minutes ago.
Okay.
There are things I remember very distinctly that we didn't celebrate 4th of July together. I took the kids to 4th of July, and it wasn't unspoken. Quantico, they always did really nice celebrations, but I just knew it was going to be me and the kids wherever we were doing. And another thing is the wind. Ray was in Afghanistan.
Yes.
And so I can remember, real windy days, just knowing, this may be a trigger, this may be a difficult moment for my veteran. But I had a lot of difficulty knowing kind of what the days were going to be like, because PTSD kind of rocked the world when it sort of, that diagnosis hit. My spouse was really good about just getting those boots on and looking real sharp in his camis and going to work every day. I didn't see any of the symptoms for PTSD until, we were completely out of the military life. And so that's why, community is so important. But I didn't know how to be a good spouse when it comes to dealing with those triggers and those symptoms and on the spouse side. But when he was deployed, it was also difficult to know exactly what the needs were, because there were long times or weeks or sometimes even a month where we didn't speak, we didn't communicate via phone or email. And so being present was difficult. So I probably did feel some shame. I know that I would love to be able to communicate with you or kind of send you the things that you want or need. And so, perhaps in those aspects,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I know those sandstorms, because I know all that sand came back in the boxes and all over. This fine sand is just kind of wow. And if you haven't been out there, you really don't know. So Cornelius, you can tell us about it. But I was thinking it's just wind, and you complaining about sand. Wow, it should be other things you complain about. But when I saw that sand that doesn't come off, that's on everything, you got to toss it out. It's just the small things that you would not think about, touching a person or walking up close to them or getting too close to them. All of these things are you don't want your back, not sitting to the door. There's a reason behind all of that. And I know, Cornelius, you're shaking your head, but you should be able to, help us out and tell us, because those are the small things that, can help others.
Yes. Yeah, I watch the door, I scan the room, I admit it. You talk about some of the shame and the denial. I put myself back to when I got back from the invasion in like April of 2004, and I was working for the city of Tulsa at that time in the city attorney's office. I was a prosecutor, and so I'm walking across the square there toward the courthouse, and I'm scanning the rooftops. I'm looking for snipers in downtown Tulsa. It was different. I drove through an intersection. I drove through a red light because when we're in convoy in Iraq, we don't stop for lights. We're driving these Upper Harbor Humvees with machine guns. We go through the lights, and I went through a light at like Harvard down there on the BA, and I'm like, oh my God, did I just do that? So those are the things that come back to haunt you. And I wanted to touch on what you talked about, like the effects of the 4th of July and all that. It was 4 or 5 years after I got back from the invasion of Iraq that I could sit down through the first 20 minutes of Saving Private Ryan.
Wow.
I just could not. That was just too intense. And it took me a couple of years to get to the point where I could sit through that. And I still occasionally jump at fireworks.
Wow. So it's a lasting effect, rightfully so. You mentioned about checking the doors. I did a program, and I'm in the program, and I didn't realize certain things you don't realize that you do. And it was myself and a few other gentlemen. We're in the class. In the class early. So we get there, you remember the 15 minutes early so I'm going to get there way early, and I'm going to scan the exit signs. I've never been to war, but it seemed like I've been training the people, my brothers and sisters on my left and right, educating me on these things. And I'm just shocked because I'm coming out of the medical environment where I'm taking care of the family members and doing other things, other needs of the military. And next thing you know, myself and 3 other guys, we all ended up in a stairwell. So I'm like, we all say we must be military members because it's who in the world would be in the stairwell. We checking out exits, and one of the individuals, he made the comment. It's like, this is really it's not safe. It's not secured. Anybody could just walk in. And I was thinking, like, why are you terrorizing us with that? But they were both military Navy SEALs. And this is not that long ago because it's like the new Navy SEALs, women could be Navy SEALs now. So now they're getting the training that they need, to accept and understand women coming in. And so it was great. But now, instead of us integrate with the class, we during breaks, we huddle by ourselves. And I'll say, hey, we really need to try to like mingle with the other folks because it's obvious. And we're walking in sync with each other. And everybody, as long as I can look to my left or my right, we feeling good. We go out to have drinks with the whole class. And, they come up and say, well, you got our back? And I was thinking, why can't you have my back? I can't have a good time. But that's just that camaraderie that it's instilled in you and it sticks with you. So that's why, it just made me think when I thought about that.
Maybe Shakespeare put it best.
Yeah.
We few, we happy few, we band of brothers and sisters. For he who has shed his blood with me this day shall be my brother. Be he ne'er so vile, this day shall gentle his condition.
Powerful.
Yeah.
That's powerful. Maggie, do you ever notice your husband but a heightened awareness?
Oh,
hypervigilant.
Certainly. Yeah, it was very present when he came home from, I think I remember we were living in Camp Lejeune and there was a hurricane right after he came back from the war. And he was ready to just pack us up and head for the mountains because so yeah, there was certainly a hypervigilance that I noticed right away. I'm certainly prone to that secondary traumatic stress.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I've seen that. I did a lot of work in the community with spouses of veterans, and that's something that we talk about pretty regularly is that secondary traumatic stress, that preparation that we do emotionally for how we feel that these triggers may affect our veterans. So
that's a powerful program that you're doing. So one of the things that's always important that I remember is to, just for people in general, just be the chopper that circle back. That circle back for a veteran, be the individual to reach your hand out and help a veteran as they transition back into the civilian world or transition careers, offer a hand and find a veteran to take under your wings. So that's what's always, that just helps me center.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've talked about a number of things here. What resources are available to our veterans to help help with PTSD, help with traumatic brain injury, survivor's guilt? What's out there for our veterans?
Actually, that's here at Family and Children Services that a veteran could actually utilize our services.
Yeah, and if there's any veterans listening, they have to struggle with the denial and the shame, but there is no shame in coming forward and asking for help.
Yeah.
Instead, that takes just like you say in the Army, it takes the strength of a warrior to reach out and say, I need help, and to know that if they are to come here, that they would be treated with respect. He or she would be treated with respect and dignity, and that their sacrifice would be appreciated, and that all are welcome.
Right. That's wonderful.
Certainly. And I think, as I say every time I work, COPES is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I think that a lot of times we get to be that first response, that first line response for anyone in crisis, but especially, our veterans that need, being able to answer that phone call or go out on scene and kind of remind them that they have support, they have access to resources in the community that can really be there and provide the needs.
One thing about access to care, the VA, the Department of Defense, they're doing a great job in, creating the different resources that helps. A person can, you have COPES, you have 988, but, that's one of the things that I think that, folks struggle with. Can you talk a little bit, how is it easier with Family and Children Services?
I like to listen to see if someone is looking for a solution or support. If someone's calling COPES, for instance, and they're looking for resources for support, there's a long list in our community that I can provide, but sometimes it's a matter of really just providing that ear and listening to exactly what's going on, because there are resources, but I feel like a lot of times it's the connection.
Right.
That's what it sounds like.
Finding that connection. And there's a lot of great places in our community where veterans can connect to the right people, and those people will continue to be consistent in their life and help make sure that they're going to be okay.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to go to the VA or the Vet Center. There's other resources like Family and Children Services that you can get support.
Yeah.
And not just for you, but you may be the family member, because the whole family. Remember, there's a thing called Military One Source, but if you don't know that, but we're right here as well. Family and Children Services have that same concept where you can get that help for the whole family and not just for that one individual. You may just be the veteran friend, the veteran mom, the veteran brother or sister, because everybody, when one person serves, everybody serves.
Mm-hmm. Well, Neil, Maggie, Lori, it's been so great having you here today. Powerful insights today, great resources. Is there anything else before we wrap up today?
Sometimes veterans do not reach out and go to the VA. Not only because they think that the people at the VA, they're really hurt. So kind of guilt and shame, but also they believe if they do go, it opens up a set of wounds that they do not want to be open. So the people there, they come back in they might have want to distance themselves because they've either retired, got out, whatever the case may have been, and they trying to put that away, like just cover that up. So basically, when you go back, you reopening those compartments that they don't want open.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm glad you mentioned that, that you articulated that perfectly, that the idea of reopening those old wounds. Thanks everybody for being here today. Any veterans out there, we do have resources available to you here at Family and Children Services, and there are other places too, but we are always happy to to work with you and to help you in any way we can. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. If you found value in what you heard today, there are a few ways you can support and stay connected to us. First, be sure to hit that subscribe button wherever you're listening to us. Subscribing ensures you never miss an episode, and it's absolutely free. It also helps us continue bringing you quality content. Consider leaving us a review. Your reviews not only make our day, but they also help others discover the podcast and join our community. Share this episode with friends, family, and anyone who might find it interesting. Word of mouth is a powerful way to grow our podcast family, and we truly appreciate your support. We're always eager to hear your thoughts, ideas, and suggestions for future episodes. Visit okstateofmind.com for all of our episodes. You can also email us at communications@fcsok.org with any episode ideas or questions. We'd love to connect with you. Thank you once again for accompanying us on the journey. Until next time.